My dears, my story begins when I was just 13 years old and learned a terrifying truth. Sometimes the people who are meant to care for you are the real enemies. This is my story of pain and despair, but also of incredible resilience. My name is Anna Wells, but everyone calls me Grandma Annie. I'm 73 and I was born in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon in 1952. Today I'm going to share a secret I've kept in my heart for over 60 years. I've never even told my own children what happened. If you're watching, please hit the like button and subscribe. Your support gives me the courage to talk about things that, even after all this time, still feel as real as yesterday. I have to thank all of you because we hit 20,000 subscribers this week. To celebrate, we're giving away $200. To enter, just subscribe to Grandparents' Stories, hit the notification bell, and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know where you are. My story starts in 1965. We were a simple family in a small 3-bedroom home. My father, John, was a truck driver, often gone for days or weeks. My mother, Helen, was a seamstress. She took in clothes from the wealthy ladies in town to wash and iron. I was the 4th child, the only girl after 3 boys. David, 19, Matthew, 17, and Luke, 15. My father saw me as a blessing. He called me his little princess and would carry me in his arms even when I was getting too big. When he was home, I felt completely safe. But his trips grew longer and his time at home became less and less frequent. It was during one of his long absences that everything changed. One hot afternoon in March 1965, my mother left me at home with my brothers. "Take care of the house, Anna," she said. "Your brothers are here." As I was doing dishes, I felt someone behind me. It was David, the oldest. He came too close, in a way that made my skin crawl. "Anna, you're becoming a young woman," he said, in a voice that was all wrong. I tried to pull away, but he grabbed my arm. "What are you doing, David?" I asked, terrified. "Let me go." Then Matthew walked in. I expected him to help me, but the look on his face told me they were in this together. Luke appeared moments later, and Joseph said, "Mum won't be back until tonight. Nobody will know." What happened in that kitchen is something I can barely remember without feeling sick. They were my brothers, the ones who should have protected me. Instead, they were my tormentors. When it was over, Luke, the youngest, said something that haunts me to this day. "If you tell anyone, no one will believe you. They'll say you're lying, that you wanted it." I lay on the floor for an hour, unable to move or stop crying. When I finally could, I ran to the bathroom and scrubbed my skin until it was raw, as if I could wash away what had happened. When my mother came home, I pretended everything was fine. That night, I locked my bedroom door and pushed a dresser against it. But it didn't help. The next morning, when my mother left for the market, they broke the door down. "No use locking yourself in, Anna," David said, with Matthew and Luke right behind him. "This house is ours too." And so began my personal hell. Every time my mother left, every time my father was away, it was a sentence. The abuse became more frequent, more violent. They knew my mother's routine better than she did and took advantage of every opportunity. I went from being a happy girl to a ghost. I stopped eating, lost weight, and my grades plummeted. My teacher noticed and asked what was wrong, but Robert's words echoed in my head. I started to doubt myself. Was it my fault? I wore baggy clothes and cut my hair, trying to make myself invisible. Nothing worked. One day, after a particularly brutal abuse, Matthew held me while David approached my face. "If you try to tell Dad, we'll say you came on to us. We'll say you've been flirting with boys at school. Who do you think he'll believe, his 3 sons or the girl who's been acting so strange?" Their manipulation was cruel and calculated. They even started lying to my mother, saying they had seen me with boys. "Anna is getting flirty, Mum," David would say. My mother started to watch me, not out of care, but out of suspicion. The only thing that gave me hope was my father's return. When he was home, they wouldn't dare touch me. He was my protector, my hero. If only he knew. But how could I tell him? How could I make him believe? Months passed, and my body began to give out. I had unexplained bleeding and fevers, and the pain made me faint. One night, after they were all particularly violent, I passed out in the bathroom. I woke up surrounded by blood, too weak to cry for help. Luke found me. I saw the pure panic in his eyes. He shouted for the others. "I think this time we went too far," he said. They cleaned the mess, changed my clothes, and left me in my room, terrified. By a miracle, my father came home early that night. He was supposed to arrive the next day, but his trip was cut short. I remember him coming into my room to kiss me goodnight. He turned on the light when he felt the wet sheet. "Anna, wake up!" he cried, his voice full of terror. His hand touched the blood. "My God, what happened here? Helen, get in here now!" I opened my eyes with difficulty and saw my hero, my father, crying. I tried to smile, but I could only whisper, "Dad, help me." That was the last thing I said before passing out again. The chaos, my father's desperate cries, the trip to the hospital. It all became a blur, but I clearly remember the look of pure terror on my brothers' faces as my father carried me out of the house. They weren't afraid for my health. They were afraid of what was to come. They knew this time there would be no hiding it. I arrived at St. Catherine's Hospital almost lifeless. My blood pressure was dangerously low. I clearly remember the look in my brothers' eyes as they took me out of the house, carried in my father's arms. A look of pure terror, not for my health but for what was to come. They knew there was no way to hide it this time. I arrived at St. Catherine's Hospital almost lifeless. My blood pressure was dangerously low. I had lost a lot of blood. I heard the doctors' voices as if from a great distance, saying things I couldn't quite understand. But one phrase was etched in my memory forever. "This girl has been a victim of continued and violent sexual abuse. We need to call the police immediately." The emergency room became a whirlwind of chaos. My father, a man who had always been so calm, began to scream, to smash things. It took 3 nurses to hold him back. I had never seen my father like that. "Who did this to my daughter? Who?" he shouted with a desperation that broke my heart. My mother cried in a corner, in a state of shock, rocking back and forth like a frightened child. She seemed unable to process what was happening. While the doctors rushed to stabilize me, a social worker entered the room. She was a young woman with kind eyes and a calm voice. She approached my bed and held my hand. "Anna, my name is Margaret. I'm here to help you. Can you tell me who did this to you?" I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come out. I looked at my father, destroyed by pain, leaning against the wall. I looked at my mother, who seemed to have aged 10 years in one night. How could I tell the truth? How could I completely destroy our family? "It was a group of guys on the way back from school," I whispered. The lie came out almost without thinking. "I don't know them. They were from out of town." It was my first lie, and it would be the first of many I would tell in the coming months. Lies to protect those who didn't deserve protection. Lies that would corrode me from the inside like acid. I spent a week in the hospital. I had to have emergency surgery. The doctor said the internal trauma was so severe that I almost lost my uterus at 13 years old. They warned my parents I might never be able to have children. During that week, I didn't see my brothers even once. My father and mother took turns by my side day and night. My father held my hand while I slept, and when I woke up, he was there with deep, dark circles under his eyes and an unshaven beard. "I'll find who did this, Princess," he promised, "even if I have to turn this whole town upside down." The police came several times. They asked the same questions, and I gave the same vague answers. I didn't know how to describe the attackers. I didn't know where they were from. I wasn't sure of anything. The officers exchanged suspicious looks. They knew I was hiding something. "Daughter, you need to help us," said a grey-haired detective. "If you don't tell the truth, these men could do the same to other girls." That tormented me, the thought that my own brothers could hurt other girls. But at the same time, how could I destroy my family? How could I make my father lose not only his daughter, but also his 3 sons? The night before I was discharged, I had an unexpected visit. My mother had gone home to shower, and my father went to buy something to eat at the hospital cafeteria. I was alone in the room for almost an hour. The door opened slowly, and Luke entered. My youngest brother, just 2 years older than me, was unrecognisable, thin, pale, with deep dark circles under his eyes. He seemed to have aged years in just 1 week. My first impulse was to scream, but he raised his hands in surrender. "Anna, please, I just came to say that—" He began to cry, something I had never seen him do before. "That I'm so sorry, truly sorry." I remained silent, observing this boy who had participated in my torment, now reduced to tears in front of me. David and Matthew said if I didn't participate, they would beat me up, that I wasn't a real man. I didn't want to. I swear I didn't want to. "Go away," was all I could say, "before Dad comes back." "He's suspicious of us, you know," Luke said nervously. "He's asked several times where we were that day. He's asking the neighbours if they saw anything strange. David is in a panic." I didn't answer. Part of me wanted my father to discover everything for justice to be done, but another part knew that this would destroy our family forever. "You didn't say anything, did you?" Luke asked again. "If you talk—" "Go away," I repeated more firmly. "I don't want to hear your threats." "It's not a threat," he said, moving towards the door. "It's just that you know how Dad is. If he finds out, he'll kill us, literally." And he left before I could answer. I stared at the closed door, tears streaming down my face, because the worst part was that he was right. My father, always so calm and loving, had a limit, and that limit was my safety. I returned home on a Sunday afternoon. My father had cleaned and arranged my room, bought a new bedspread, and even painted the walls a light yellow I'd always liked. "So you feel like you're in a new place," he explained. "A fresh start." A new sturdy lock had been installed on the door. My father solemnly handed me the key. "No one enters here without your permission. No one." The first days at home were strange. My brothers hardly appeared when I was in the common rooms. They left early and returned late, avoiding meeting me or my father. My mother tried to act normally, as if everything would go back to how it was before. She prepared my favourite foods, combed my hair like when I was little, and tried to make me smile. But there was something broken between us, something I didn't know if it would ever be fixed. "Daughter, you need to eat," she insisted, seeing that I barely touched the food. "You need to regain your strength." But how to explain that each bite was an immense effort? That I didn't feel hunger, didn't feel anything but a huge emptiness. My father extended his leave from work. He said he wouldn't go back on the road until I was completely recovered and until the bandits were caught. He spent days at the police station talking with investigators, offering rewards, making posters with the vague description I gave of the imaginary attackers. At night, he would sit on the edge of my bed and hold my hand until I fell asleep. "Nothing bad will happen to you again, Princess," he promised. "Never again." But the harm was already done, and it lived under the same roof. The nightmares started almost immediately. I would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, cold, sweating, reliving every moment of horror. My father would come running, hug me, and try to calm me down. Sometimes I would get so agitated that I needed to take the medications the doctor prescribed. "They're just dreams, daughter," he would say, wiping my tears. "They can't hurt you." But they weren't just dreams. They were memories, memories that would haunt me for decades. At school, things weren't better. Although no one officially knew what had happened to me, rumours spread like wildfire. Small towns have big ears and even bigger mouths. "Look at the girl who was attacked," they whispered in the corridors when I returned to classes almost a month later. "They say it was men from out of town, a whole gang. Some people treated me as if I had a contagious disease. Others with a pity so deep that it was almost worse. My friends didn't know how to act around me, what to say or how to behave. I began to isolate myself more and more. I spent breaks alone, sitting under a tree in the yard, away from the looks and whispers. My grades, which were already bad, got even worse. The teachers tried to be understanding, but I could see the frustration in their eyes. Anna was such a promising student, I heard the principal comment to my teacher as I passed by her office. It's a shame all this happened. Will she be able to recover? At home, the tension was palpable. My father continued his crusade to find the culprits, growing increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress. My mother tried to keep the peace, always walking on tiptoes, as if fearing that any noise could break our already shattered family even more. My brothers developed different strategies. David, the oldest, their leader, acted as if nothing had happened. He even tried to be kind to me sometimes, offered help with homework and asked if I wanted to watch television. "I'm worried about you, sis," he would say with a falseness that made me sick. We have to stick together in this difficult time. Matthew, the middle one, chose total distance. He spent more time out of the house, got a job at a mechanic's shop, and came home just to sleep. When we were forced to be in the same room, like at dinner, he didn't raise his eyes from his plate and never said a word to me. Luke, the youngest, seemed to be as destroyed as I was. He was visibly losing weight, had nightmares like mine, and would jump when someone touched him unexpectedly. Several times I caught him observing me from afar, with eyes full of remorse and fear. One night, about 3 months after the hospital, I heard a violent argument in my parents' bedroom. My father rarely raised his voice, so I was immediately on alert. "There's something wrong with this whole story, Helen," he shouted. "Can't you see? These boys are acting very strangely." "What are you insinuating, John?" my mother responded, her voice trembling. "For God's sake, they're your sons." "And she is my daughter too," he shot back. "Look at her, Helen. Look at what they did to our girl. She doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, doesn't smile anymore." Those eyes were no longer those of a child. That was the fault of those thugs, those bandits that nobody saw, that nobody knows, that left no clue in Riverdale, where everybody knows everybody. I held my breath. My father was suspicious. His protective instinct was sniffing out the truth behind my lies. "Luke almost fainted when I asked him where he was that afternoon," my father continued. "Matthew can't even look me in the face. And David is aggressive, on the defensive all the time. There's something that's not adding up in this story, Helen." "You're delirious," my mother insisted, but her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "It's the tiredness, the worry." "You haven't slept properly in months." "I'm going to discover the truth," my father stated with a determination that made me tremble. "One way or another." I closed my bedroom door and cried silently until I fell asleep. The truth was approaching like a storm on the horizon, and when it arrived, it would sweep everything in its path. It was a Tuesday in June 1966, almost 4 months after my trip to the hospital. That day began like any other in this new sombre routine we had established. My father left early to go to the police station as he did almost every day. My mother was in the backyard hanging clothes on the clothesline. I was in the living room trying to concentrate on a math lesson that I couldn't understand. David entered the room without making a sound. When I realized he was already sitting next to me on the sofa, I felt my entire body freeze with fear. "We need to talk, Anna," he said with that falsely gentle voice he had adopted in the last few months. "This situation can't continue like this." I got up immediately, ready to run, but he held my arm. "Calm down. I'm not going to hurt you," he said. But his grip said otherwise. "I just want you to understand something. Dad is suspicious of us. Yesterday, he asked Luke a bunch of questions, and the kid almost gave everything away. If that happens, the whole family goes down the drain." "Is that what you want?" I looked into his eyes, those eyes that used to be of a brother and now were of a monster, and found a courage I didn't know I had. "Let go of my arm now," I said through clenched teeth. "Never touch me again." He seemed surprised by my reaction. He released my arm slowly. "You don't understand, do you? If you tell the truth, Dad will kill us, literally. Do you want to have that on your conscience?" "You didn't think about my life when you did what you did." I replied, with tears streaming down my face. Why should I think about yours now? David turned red with anger. He stood up, standing much taller than me, intimidating. You're going to keep that mouth shut, he said, approaching again, or I swear that... He didn't get to finish the sentence. The living room door opened violently, hitting the wall. My father was standing there holding a folder of documents, his face white as paper. Get away from my daughter, he said, in a voice I didn't recognize, low, controlled, but loaded with a fury I had never seen before. David took 2 steps back, raising his hands. Dad, it's not what you're thinking. My father threw the folder on the centre table. Papers scattered across the floor. I recognized the hospital letterhead. I just got back from the hospital, my father said, still in that controlled and terrible voice. I went to get copies of Anna's exams. I wanted to send them to a specialist in Philadelphia. He picked up one of the papers from the floor and held it as if it was something poisonous. Do you know what it says here, David? The doctor documented your sister's injuries in detail. And do you know what else he wrote? That these injuries were consistent with repeated abuse over a long period. It wasn't a single attack, as Anna said. It was months. My father turned to me with tears in his eyes. Why did you lie, daughter? Why did you protect who did this to you? I opened my mouth but couldn't speak. The words were stuck in my throat, suffocated by months of fear and shame. Dad, she's confused, David tried to intervene. The doctors themselves said that trauma can affect memory. Shut up, my father roared, finally losing control. I heard the end of your conversation. You're going to keep that mouth shut. What does she need to keep secret, David? What? At that moment, the kitchen door opened and Matthew entered. He stopped as soon as he saw the scene in the living room, like an animal caught in the sights of a rifle. Good that you arrived, Matthew, my father said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I was just wanting to talk to you too. Matthew looked at me, at David, at the papers scattered on the floor, and immediately understood what was happening. Dad, I can explain, he began. But my father raised his hand, interrupting him. Go call your mother, my father ordered, and then find Luke. I want everyone in this room in 5 minutes. Matthew hesitated, clearly considering running away, but something in my father's look made him obey. He went out toward the backyard, calling my mother. My father approached me and held my hands. Anna, daughter, I need you to be brave now. I need you to tell the truth, the whole truth, no matter how painful it is. I looked at David, who was staring at me with palpable hatred. I looked at the door through which Matthew had left. I thought of Luke, who was probably hiding in some corner of the house, hiding from his own nightmares. It was them, Dad, I finally whispered, the words almost inaudible. It was my brothers. My father closed his eyes for a moment, as if he had received a physical blow. When he opened them again, I saw that something had changed in him forever. How long? He asked, his voice trembling. Since March, when you made that long trip to Boise. 3 months, he murmured, doing the math. My God, 3 months! My mother came running into the living room with a worried face. Matthew came right behind, pale as a ghost. What's going on, John? She asked, looking at the chaotic scene in the room. Where's Luke? My father asked, ignoring her question. I don't know, Matthew answered. He's not in the bedroom or in the backyard. It doesn't matter, my father said, standing up. Anna just told me the truth about who really hurt her. My mother put her hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. She knew. Deep down, maybe she always knew. It's not true, David said, trying to keep his composure. She's confused, traumatized. She's making this up. Yes, it is true, I said with a strength I didn't know I had. All 3 of you, since March, every time Mum left. My mother fell to her knees on the floor, sobbing. Matthew leaned against the wall as if his legs could no longer support him. David remained standing, defiant, but his face had lost all colour. What happened next was like an explosion in slow motion. My father, always so calm and contained, transformed into a force of nature. He advanced on David with a roar that seemed to come from the depths of the earth. The first punch caught my brother by surprise, throwing him against the bookshelf. "John, no!" my mother screamed, trying to get up, but it was too late. Years of contained anger, months of impotent frustration, the revelation of the deepest betrayal. Everything exploded at that moment. My father lifted David by the collar and continued beating him while shouting things I never thought I would hear from him. Matthew tried to intervene, pulling my father back, but ended up taking a blow that threw him to the floor. My mother was screaming. I was screaming. The living room had turned into a battlefield. When the neighbours arrived, attracted by the commotion, they found my father being held by 3 men. David bleeding on the floor, Matthew leaning against the wall with a broken nose, and my mother trying to protect me in a corner of the room. "He's gone crazy," someone said. "Call the police." Minutes later, police cars filled our street. Officers entered the house, separating everyone. One of them, who knew my father from the time he spent at the police station, tried to calm him down. "John, for God's sake, what happened here?" My own sons, My father couldn't complete the sentence, choked by anger and pain. It was I who spoke. With surprising clarity, I told everything to the police. Every detail, every abuse, every threat. It was as if a dam had broken inside me, and the truth flowed uncontrollably. The police listened in silence, their faces hardening with each word. When I finished, one of them turned to David and Matthew. "You're under arrest." "And Luke?" a younger officer asked. "Was he also involved?" "Also," I confirmed with tears in my eyes, "but he was forced by the others. They threatened to beat him if he didn't participate." At that moment, as if he had been summoned, Luke appeared at the door of the living room. He had heard everything, hiding in some corner. His face was soaked with tears, his eyes red from crying so much. "It's true," he said, his voice choked. "I was part of it. I deserve to be arrested too." My father, who was being attended to by a paramedic, looked at Luke with a mixture of contempt and pity. "You are no longer my son," he said simply. "None of you are." David and Matthew were taken handcuffed to the police car. Luke was placed in another without handcuffs, but equally under arrest. Before getting into the car, he looked at me one last time. "Forgive me, Anna," he said, so low that I almost didn't hear. "I know I don't deserve it, but forgive me." I didn't answer. There was no forgiveness inside me at that moment, just an immense emptiness, as if something vital had been torn from my chest. In the weeks that followed, our family became the main topic of conversation in town. The local newspapers reported the case with sensational headlines: "Abusive brothers arrested in Riverdale. Father discovers family horror and turns violent. Family shattered by terrible secret." The trial was quick by the standards of the time. We had the medical evidence, my testimony, and Luke's confession. David and Matthew were each sentenced to 12 years in prison. Luke, being a minor and having confessed on his own, received a lighter sentence, 6 years in a juvenile reformatory. My father was never the same again. The gentle, smiling man I knew vanished that June afternoon. In his place was a hollow shell, a man broken by guilt and anger. He couldn't look me in the eyes without crying. He couldn't talk about what happened without his hands trembling. "I should have noticed," he would repeat like a mantra. "I should have stayed home more, paid more attention." "I failed you, Princess." My mother fell into a deep depression. She spent days in bed, not eating, not talking. When she finally started to get up again, it was as if she had aged 20 years. Her hair turned completely white in a matter of months. "How did I not notice?" she tortured herself. "How does a mother not see something like this?" Our house, once full of voices and life, became a mausoleum. My brothers' bedrooms were locked, their belongings stored in boxes in the attic. We never spoke their names aloud again, as if they were a curse. At school, the situation became unbearable. Everyone knew what had happened. Some looked at me with pity, others with a morbid curiosity, as if I were a circus attraction. The whispers followed me through the corridors. It's her, the girl who was abused by her own brothers. They say the father almost killed the sons when he found out. The whole family went crazy from what I heard. I couldn't take it. After 2 weeks of trying to face those stares and whispers, I begged my parents to let me change schools. But my father had a different idea. "Let's leave this place," he said one night during a silent dinner. "There's nothing for us in this town, just bad memories." In August 1966, we left Riverdale behind. My father requested a transfer at the transport company, and we moved to New Hope, almost 250 miles away. It was a town where nobody knew us, where we wouldn't be that family from that terrible case. We left behind the house, the furniture, the photographs, almost everything that could remind us of the past. We started from scratch in a small downtown apartment near the Delaware River. But as I painfully discovered, no matter how far you run, some things you carry inside you, like invisible chains that never fully come loose. The first months in New Hope were like living in a protective bubble. I, who had always lived in a small flat town, now found myself surrounded by hills, historic buildings, and a fog that covered everything on cold mornings. It was as if we had ended up in another century, in another world. We began our new life in August 1966. I had just turned 14. My father got a steady job in the transportation company office, so he wouldn't have to travel. For the first time since I could remember, he would be home every day. My mother found a small job at a bakery near our home, making pastries. It was less than she was used to as a seamstress, but it kept her busy and away from dark thoughts. They enrolled me in a Catholic school, St. Mary's Academy. There, nobody knew my past. To everyone, I was just the new girl, a little quiet, a little sad, but just another teenager adapting to a change. "We have the chance to start over, Princess," my father would say as we walked the cobblestone streets on weekends. "Here, nobody knows us, nobody knows what we went through. But I knew, my body knew, my mind knew." The scars were still there. Some were visible, but most were invisible to others' eyes. The nightmares didn't stop with the change of town. Almost every night I would wake up screaming, cold and sweating, feeling hands that didn't exist touching me. My father would always run to my room and hug me until I stopped shaking. Sometimes he would stay all night, sitting in a chair beside my bed. "It will pass, daughter," he promised, stroking my hair. "With time, it will pass." But it didn't pass. In fact, the nightmares became more elaborate, more realistic. Sometimes I dreamed that my brothers had escaped from prison and found me in New Hope. I would wake up so terrified that I couldn't breathe, as if invisible hands were squeezing my throat. My parents took me to a doctor who prescribed sleeping pills, but the pills didn't prevent the nightmares. They just left me trapped in them, unable to wake up. After a few even worse nights, I stopped taking them. At the new school, I tried to adapt. The nuns were strict but fair. The other girls tried to approach me, curious about the student who transferred in the middle of the school year. But I built walls around myself, invisible but impenetrable. "You never talk about your old town," a classmate named Teresa commented one day during recess. "Do you miss it?" "No," I answered dryly. "I don't miss anything from there." "What about your friends?" "Your family?" "I don't want to talk about it." Soon they gave up trying to get information out of me. I became known as the weird one, the unfriendly one, the one with no friends, and I preferred it that way. Friendship meant trust, and I didn't know how to trust anymore. At home, my parents tried to rebuild some sense of normalcy. My mother decorated the small apartment with flowers, colourful curtains, and small trinkets she bought at the market. My father brought me books, chocolates, anything he thought might make me smile. But there was a ghost between us, or rather 3 ghosts. We never talked about my brothers, never mentioned their names. It was as if they had died, as if they had never existed. But their absence was a constant presence, a black hole that sucked all the joy out of our lives. At night I would hear my mother cry softly in her room. My father would try to console her, but how do you console a mother who lost 3 sons to prison and discovered they were monsters? How do you deal with the guilt of not noticing, not protecting your youngest daughter? "I should have seen it, John," she would say between sobs. "How does a mother not notice something like this?" "It's not your fault, Helen," my father would respond, with a tired voice that didn't even convince himself. "They deceived us all." 6 months after we moved to New Hope, an envelope arrived in the mail. It was from the State Reformatory for Juvenile Offenders, a letter from Luke. My father was furious. He wanted to burn it without opening it. My mother begged to read it. I just stood there, paralysed, looking at that piece of paper that had the power to reopen all the wounds. "It's addressed to Anna," my mother said, showing my name on the envelope. "She has the right to decide." My father looked at me, his eyes full of pain and anger. "You don't need to read this, Princess. You don't need to let them back into your life." I took the envelope with trembling hands. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Part of me wanted to tear it into 1,000 pieces. Another part wanted to know what he had to say. "I'll think about it," I answered, putting the letter in my pocket. "I don't know yet." What we did to you was unforgivable. I wake up every day in this place with the same question. How could I do something so horrible to my own sister? I won't make excuses. I won't say it was just Anthony and Joseph's fault that they forced me. Yes, they pressured me, they threatened me. But I had a choice. I could have said no. I could have told Mum, Dad, someone. I could have protected you as a brother should. Instead, I became your tormentor, part of your nightmare. I'm doing therapy here. The psychologist says, I need to understand why I did what I did to never repeat it. He says, I have a chance to rebuild my life when I get out of here. But first, I need to fully recognise the harm I caused. And I do recognise it, Louise. Every day, every night, every moment you suffered because of us. I carry this with me like a weight that never goes away. I'm not asking you to answer me. I'm not asking to return to your life. I just wanted you to know that I'm deeply sorry, and that if I could go back in time, I would have been the brother you deserved. If someday, many years from now, you feel you can give me the chance to ask for forgiveness in person, I'll be waiting. But I understand if that day never comes. I hope you're managing to rebuild your life away from here. I hope that one day you find peace with sincere remorse. Robert, when I finished reading, I realised I was crying. They weren't tears of sadness or anger, but something different, something I couldn't name, a confused mixture of emotions that left me exhausted. I put the letter in a drawer and never answered, but I didn't destroy it either. Somehow those words written on paper were an acknowledgement of what had happened, a confirmation that it hadn't been a nightmare, that I wasn't crazy. The months passed, turning into years. I adapted to life in New Hope, to the slower pace, to the traditions of that historic town. At school I remained isolated, but gradually some classmates broke through my barriers. They didn't become close friends, but they were acceptable company. One of them, Martha, the pharmacist's daughter, was the first person I trusted with a bit of my story. I didn't tell her everything, obviously, just that I had gone through something very difficult in the other town, and that's why we moved. It must have been horrible, she said, without pressing for details. It was, I answered, surprised by my own sincerity. But I'm trying to move forward. If you need to talk, I'm here. She offered with a simplicity that touched me. It was the first time someone offered help without seeming to be dying of curiosity, without asking 1,000 questions, without looking at me like a freak, just offering presence, company, an ear if I needed it. At home, things slowly improved. The nightmares didn't completely disappear, but they became less frequent. My mother stopped crying every night, began to smile occasionally, especially when she brought home funny stories about the ladies who frequented the bakery. My father remained overprotective, wanting to know where I was every minute, calling the school if I was 10 minutes late getting home. But even that diminished over time as he saw that I was somehow surviving. In 1968, 2 years after our move, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived, this time from the state penitentiary. It was from Anthony. Unlike Robert's letter, this one was short, almost abrupt. "Louise, I know you'll probably tear this up without reading it. I know you hate me and you're right. What we did has no excuse. I'm writing because I heard that Robert sent you a letter. He's trying to play the remorseful one, the good guy, but don't believe him. He participated in everything of his own free will. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm paying for what I did. Here in prison, when they find out why you're in, your life becomes hell. Not even the worst criminals respect someone who does what we did. Maybe that gives you some comfort knowing we're suffering. I hope so, Anthony." This letter, unlike the first, I tore into pieces and threw in the trash. I didn't tell my parents I had received it. I didn't want to reopen that wound, didn't want to see the look of pain in their eyes. Anoni's words haunted me for days, not out of remorse or pity for him, but because they confirmed something I had always suspected. Robert wasn't just a victim of circumstances. He had chosen to participate, as Anthony said. A few weeks later, a third letter arrived from Joseph. I didn't even open it. I threw it directly into the fire, watching the paper be consumed by the flames, wishing my memories could be destroyed with the same ease. In 1970, when I turned 18, a difficult decision presented itself. Robert had served his sentence and would be released. He didn't know where we were, but he could find out if he wanted to. The possibility of a reunion, even an accidental one, terrified me. "Do we need to move again?" I asked my parents during dinner. "What if he comes looking for us?" My father, who didn't know about the letters, was surprised by my sudden concern. "He doesn't know where we are, Princess." I carried that letter with me for weeks, in my room, at school, on walks around town. Sometimes I forgot it was there. Other times it was all I could think about. What could Luke say that would change anything? What words could heal what he and the others had broken? On a Sunday afternoon, alone in my room while my parents were at Mass, I finally had the courage. I opened the envelope carefully, as if it might contain something dangerous. The handwriting was small and cramped, covering 4 entire pages. I began to read, my heart racing. "Dear Anna, I don't even know where to start. Maybe by saying that I don't expect your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. What we did to you was unforgivable. I wake up every day in this place with the same question. How could I do something so horrible to my own sister? I won't make excuses. I won't say it was just David and Matthew's fault, that they forced me. Yes, they pressured me, they threatened me, but I had a choice. I could have said no. I could have told Mom, Dad, someone. I could have protected you as a brother should. Instead, I became your tormentor, part of your nightmare. I'm doing therapy here. The psychologist says I need to understand why I did what I did, to never repeat it. He says I have a chance to rebuild my life when I get out of here, but first I need to fully recognize the harm I caused. And I do recognize it, Anna. Every day, every night, every moment you suffered because of us. I carry this with me like a weight that never goes away. I'm not asking you to answer me. I'm not asking to return to your life. I just wanted you to know that I'm deeply sorry, and that if I could go back in time, I would have been the brother you deserved. If someday, many years from now, you feel you can give me the chance to ask for forgiveness in person, I'll be waiting. But I understand if that day never comes. I hope you're managing to rebuild your life away from here. I hope that one day you find peace with sincere remorse. Luke. When I finished reading, I realized I was crying. They weren't tears of sadness or anger, but something different, something I couldn't name. A confused mixture of emotions that left me exhausted. I put the letter in a drawer and never answered, but I didn't destroy it either. Somehow those words on paper were an acknowledgement of what had happened, a confirmation that it hadn't been a nightmare, that I wasn't crazy. The months passed, turning into years. I adapted to life in New Hope, to the slower pace, to the traditions of that historic town. At school I remained isolated, But gradually, some classmates broke through my barriers. They didn't become close friends, but they were acceptable company. One of them, Martha, the pharmacist's daughter, was the first person I trusted with a bit of my story. I didn't tell her everything, obviously, just that I had gone through something very difficult in the other town, and that's why we moved. "It must have been horrible," she said without pressing for details. "It was," I answered, surprised by my own sincerity. "But I'm trying to move forward. If you need to talk, I'm here," she offered with a simplicity that touched me. It was the first time someone offered help without seeming to be dying of curiosity, without asking 1,000 questions, without looking at me like a freak, just offering company, an ear if I needed it. At home, things slowly improved. The nightmares didn't completely disappear, but they became less frequent. My mother stopped crying every night and began to smile occasionally, especially when she brought home funny stories about the ladies who frequented the bakery. My father remained overprotective, wanting to know where I was every minute, calling the school if I was 10 minutes late getting home. But even that diminished over time as he saw that I was somehow surviving. In 1968, 2 years after our move, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived, this time from the state penitentiary. It was from David. Unlike Luke's letter, this one was short, almost abrupt. "Anna, I know you'll probably tear this up without reading it. I know you hate me, and you're right. What we did has no excuse. I'm writing because I heard that Luke sent you a letter. He's trying to play the remorseful one, the good guy. But don't believe him. He participated in everything of his own free will. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm paying for what I did. Here in prison, when they find out why you're in, your life becomes hell. Not even the worst criminals respect someone who does what we did. Maybe that gives you some comfort, knowing we're suffering. I hope so. David." This letter, unlike the first, I tore into pieces and threw in the trash. I didn't tell my parents I had received it. I didn't want to reopen that wound or see the look of pain in their eyes. David's words haunted me for days, not out of remorse or pity for him, but because they confirmed something I had always suspected. Luke wasn't just a victim of circumstances. He had chosen to participate, as David said. A few weeks later, a third letter arrived from Matthew. I didn't even open it. I threw it directly into the fire, watching the paper be consumed by the flames, wishing my memories could be destroyed with the same ease. In 1970, when I turned 18, a difficult decision presented itself. Luke had served his sentence and would be released. He didn't know where we were, but he could find out if he wanted to. The possibility of a reunion, even an accidental one, terrified me. "Do we need to move again?" I asked my parents during dinner. "What if he comes looking for us?" My father, who didn't know about the letters, was surprised by my sudden concern. "He doesn't know where we are, Princess. And even if he found out, I would never let him get near you." "But you won't be with me all the time," I argued. "What if I run into him on the street? What if he shows up at school?" I continued my journey, carrying that letter in my pocket for weeks, but I finally had the courage to open it. When I finished reading, a confused mixture of emotions left me exhausted. It was an acknowledgement, a confirmation that I wasn't crazy. I put the letter in a drawer, never answering it, but never destroying it either. The months passed, turning into years. I adapted to life in New Hope, to the slower pace and historic charm of the town. At school, I remained isolated, but gradually some classmates broke through my walls. They weren't close friends, but they were acceptable company. My first confidant was a girl named Martha, the pharmacist's daughter. I didn't tell her everything, just that I had been through something very difficult in my old town, which was why we moved. "It must have been horrible," she said. "It was," I answered, surprised by my own sincerity. "But I'm trying to move forward." "If you need to talk, I'm here," she offered, with a simple kindness that touched me deeply. At home, things slowly improved. The nightmares became less frequent. My mother stopped crying every night and started to smile occasionally. My father remained overprotective, wanting to know where I was every minute, but even that diminished as he saw that I was surviving. In 1968, 2 years after our move, a letter arrived from David, followed weeks later by one from Matthew. Both letters, unlike Luke's, were short and abrupt. They only confirmed my suspicion that Luke was not just a victim of circumstances, that he had chosen to participate. I threw both letters away without a second thought. I didn't want to reopen that wound. In 1970, when I turned 18, I faced a new fear. Luke was to be released from the reformatory. The possibility of an accidental reunion terrified me. "Do we need to move again?" I asked my parents. My father, who didn't know about the letters, was surprised. "He doesn't know where we are, Princess, and even if he did, I'd never let him get near you." "But you won't be with me all the time," I argued. "What if I run into him on the street?" My mother, who was quieter than usual, finally spoke. "Maybe it's time to face these fears, Anna. We can't run forever." I was shocked. My mother, who had plunged into depression, was now talking about confronting the past. "What do you mean, Mum?" "I mean that life goes on. Luke has served his sentence. You're growing up. You'll be going to college soon. We can't live in fear forever." My father looked at her as if she had gone crazy. "Are you defending that monster?" "No," she answered firmly. "I would never defend what they did. But Luke was the youngest. He was influenced by the others, maybe." "Maybe what?" my father interrupted, his voice rising. "Maybe we should invite him to dinner. Pretend nothing happened." "John, that's not what I'm saying, and you know it. I just think that living with so much hatred, so much fear, isn't getting us anywhere. We pretend we're a normal family, but we're not. We're stuck in that day in that living room forever." This was the first time I saw my parents argue so seriously since the discovery of the abuse. "Would you lose your son?" my mother continued, now crying. "Would you never see Luke again, not even to hear what he has to say?" "He's no longer my son," my father answered, his voice losing its conviction. "None of them are." I observed them in silence, feeling something strange grow inside me. It wasn't forgiveness, it would never be, but maybe it was acceptance. The acceptance that what happened was part of my story, and that running wouldn't change that. "I don't want to see Luke," I finally said, interrupting their argument. "I'm not ready for that, and maybe I never will be. But I also don't want to run again. This is our home now, our life." My parents looked at me, surprised by my firmness. For the first time since the abuse, I was making a decision about my own life, not just accepting what they decided for me. "I'm afraid," I admitted, "but I don't want that fear to control every step I take for the rest of my life." My father stood up and hugged me. "You're the bravest person I know, Princess," he said, his voice breaking. Much braver than me. That night marked a turning point in our family. The scars remained. The nightmares still appeared occasionally. But something had fundamentally changed. For the first time, I felt that I could have a future not completely defined by my past. In 1971, I was accepted to the College of Education in Philadelphia. I was going to move, live in a dorm with other students, and start an independent life. My parents were proud, but also terrified. "Are you sure you're ready, daughter?" my mother asked while helping me pack. "Philadelphia is a big, dangerous city." "I'm ready, Mom," I answered, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I can't let fear prevent me from living." That night, on the eve of my departure, I had a different dream. It wasn't a nightmare. It was a dream of liberation. I dreamed I was in an open field under an infinite blue sky, and that I could run without stopping, with nothing holding me back and no one chasing me. I woke up with tears in my eyes, but for the first time in a long time, they were tears of hope. Philadelphia in 1971 was a completely different world from New Hope. In the first few days at the dorm, I felt that old fear, that shadow. but there was a new determination, a strength I didn't know existed inside me. My roommates were loud, cheerful, and full of plans, so different from me. "Anna, you're always so quiet," said Chloe, my roommate. "You need to go out more, enjoy life." Gradually, I opened up, not about my past, but about my tastes and my dreams for the future. I discovered I liked music, especially Simon and Garfunkel, and that I loved small children. "You're going to be an amazing teacher," Chloe told me one day. "You have patience, you have affection. That's what children need." The College of Education opened my horizons. I learned about child development and psychology. Every class was like a window opening to a new world where I could make a difference in the lives of other children. Traumatic childhood experiences can profoundly mark emotional development, my professor explained one day. But with adequate support, human resilience is surprising. Those words touched something deep inside me. Resilience. The ability to recover, adapt, and grow despite adversity. That's what I was building every day without even realizing it. My parents called every week, worried and missing me. During my first holiday visit, I noticed how they seemed older, more tired. My father's shoulders were hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. My mother, despite smiling more, sometimes had a distant look, lost in thoughts I could only imagine. "Are you okay?" I asked during dinner. "We are," my father answered, holding my mother's hand on the table. "We just miss you, Princess." During that visit, I realized it wasn't just me who needed to move forward. My parents were also stuck in the past, reliving that terrible day over and over. It was as if time had stopped for the three of us in June 1966. "You need to live too," I told them the night before returning to Philadelphia. "You can't spend the rest of your lives just waiting for my visits, worried about me." "It's easier said than done, daughter," my father said with his sad smile. "I know," I answered, hugging him. "Believe me, I know." Back in Philadelphia, I immersed myself in my studies with even more determination. I wasn't just building a future for myself, I was trying to prove that it was possible to overcome the past, that scars could become marks of a battle won. In my second year of college, I met Mark. He studied engineering and lived in a dorm near ours. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. He offered me a cup of soda, commented on the music, and we talked for hours. Mark was different from the other guys who had tried to approach me. He wasn't insistent or trying to impress me. He had a calmness, a natural gentleness that made me feel safe. "Can I call you sometime?" he asked when the party was ending. I hesitated. Relationships weren't part of my plans. The idea of intimacy, of trusting someone to that extent, terrified me. "Just to talk," he added, noticing my hesitation. "No pressure." I nodded, feeling a mix of fear and a new emotion I couldn't name. Mark called 3 days later, and the next week, and the week after that. Our conversations were simple, about books, movies, classes, the future. He never asked about my past, never forced topics that made me uncomfortable. On our first date alone, we went to the movies to see Love Story. When he tried to hold my hand in the dark, I reacted instinctively, moving away as if I had received an electric shock. "Sorry," he murmured without insisting. "I won't do anything you don't want." That simple, obvious, yet incredibly powerful phrase echoed in my head for days. It was the first time someone had said that to me, someone who recognized my right to say no, to set boundaries. In the following weeks, our friendship with Mark grew. He was patient and respectful, never crossing the boundaries I established. When I finally had the courage to hold his hand during a walk through Fairmount Park, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. "There's something in your past that hurt you a lot, isn't there?" Mark asked one day as we sat by the Schuylkill River. "You don't have to tell me. I just want you to know that when you're ready, if you ever are, I'll be here to listen." I felt tears in my eyes. How did he know? How did he understand so well what I felt without me needing to explain? "Thank you," was all I could say. Our relationship progressed slowly, at my pace. Each barrier I managed to overcome was a victory. The first kiss, months after we met, the first time I talked about my family, albeit superficially, the first time I introduced him to my parents during their visit to Philadelphia. My father, always protective, examined him with suspicious eyes. My mother, more intuitive, immediately noticed that Mark was special. "He has good eyes," she told me later, "eyes of someone who respects." In 1974, in my last year of college, I received news that shook my world again. David and Matthew had been released for good behaviour after serving just over half of their sentences. The letter informing me of this came from my former lawyer in Riverdale, who thought I should know. "They don't know where you are," he assured me in the letter, "and they've been forbidden from trying to make contact." Even so, the fear came back with full force. What if they looked for me? What if they wanted revenge for having been imprisoned? For days I couldn't sleep. The nightmares started again. I began to see dangers in every shadow. Mark noticed something was wrong, but didn't pressure me. He just was there, offering silent support, respecting my space. It was at this moment that I made a decision that would change my life forever. I was tired of running, tired of allowing fear to control my existence. If I really wanted to move forward, I needed to face my demons once and for all. "I need to tell you something," I said to Mark one night, sitting in the small apartment he had rented after graduating. "About my past, about why I am the way I am." He held my hand, his eyes full of understanding. "Only if you want to, Anna. It doesn't have to be today. It doesn't have to be ever if it's too painful." But I needed to. For the first time I told the whole story, from the first day in the kitchen of my house in Riverdale to my father's discovery, my brother's imprisonment, our escape to new hope. I spoke without stopping, the words coming out like a torrent that had been dammed up for years. Mark listened in silence, holding my hands, silent tears streaming down his face. When I finished, emotionally and physically exhausted, he hugged me with such gentleness that I started crying again. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he said simply, "and I love you. Nothing you told me changes that. Nothing." That night marked the true beginning of my healing. Sharing my story, my darkest secret, and being accepted and loved despite it, or perhaps even more because of it, was liberating in a way I never imagined possible. In the following weeks, with Mark's support, I made another difficult decision: to confront my brothers. Not in person, I wasn't ready for that yet, but through letters. 3 letters, one for each of them. To Luke, I wrote about how his participation in the abuse, even being the youngest and claiming to have been coerced, deeply hurt me. I told him how I spent years trying to understand how my own brother, whom I loved and trusted, could be part of something so horrible. "I don't hate you anymore," I wrote at the end, "but I can't completely forgive you either. What I can do is wish you find peace, rebuild your life, and never cause pain to anyone again." To Matthew, my middle brother, always distant and cold, I wrote about the anger I felt for years. How he, who should have protected me as an older brother, chose to join David in the abuse. "I hope the time in prison made you reflect," I wrote. "I hope you understand the gravity of what you did. I don't want to see you again. I don't want to have contact, but I want you to know that I won't live in fear of you any more." The letter to David, the leader, the instigator, was the hardest. For days I stared at the blank paper, unable to find words that expressed the depth of my pain, my anger, my contempt. "You stole my childhood," I ended up writing. "You stole my innocence, my trust, my ability to feel safe. For years you controlled my life through fear. But that ends now. I'm not afraid of you anymore. You have no more power over me." I sent all 3 letters on the same day, without expecting a response, without wanting a response. It was a symbolic act, a declaration of independence. From that moment on, I would no longer be defined as a victim of my brothers. I would be defined by my own choices, my own path. In December 1974, I graduated in education. My parents were in the audience, proud smiles on their aged faces. Mark was by my side, clapping louder than everyone when I received my diploma. 2 weeks later, he proposed to me. "I don't have much to offer besides my love," he said, showing me a simple ring. "But I promise to take care of you, respect your boundaries, and build a life where you feel safe and loved." I hesitated, not for lack of love. I loved Mark more than I imagined it was possible to love someone, but out of fear. Fear of not being able to be a complete wife. Fear that my scars were too deep. "What if I can never—" I murmured, embarrassed. "What if the trauma is too strong?" Mark smiled, that gentle smile that won me over from the beginning. "Anna, marriage isn't just about that. It's companionship, it's friendship, it's building something together. The rest comes when it comes. If it comes, and if it doesn't, we'll still have all that." We got married in March 1975 in a simple ceremony in New Hope. It was a sunny day, scented with cherry blossoms. My father walked me down the aisle, tears in his eyes. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, Princess," he whispered. "Every day I thank God that you survived, that you became this incredible woman." Our married life began in a small apartment in Philadelphia. Mark worked at a construction company. I got a job as a teacher at an elementary school. We were young, in love, full of dreams. Physical intimacy was a challenge, as we had expected. There were nights of tears, of painful memories resurfacing, of panic. But Mark never pressured me, never showed frustration. He waited patiently, loving me in the way I could accept. In 1976, I discovered I was pregnant. It was a mix of joy and terror. The doctors had said I might never be able to have children due to the damage caused by the abuse, and part of me feared not knowing how to be a mother, how to protect a child when my own childhood had been so violated. "We'll manage," Mark assured me, holding my hand as we looked at the first ultrasound together. Mary was born in January 1977, a healthy girl with her father's eyes, and they said, my smile. Holding her in my arms for the first time was like a miracle. So small, so perfect, so trusting of the world, with no idea of the evil that could exist. "I'll protect you," I promised, kissing her soft forehead. "Always." Being a mother healed me in ways I never imagined possible. Seeing Mary grow, completely trusting me, showed me that I could be strong, that I could protect, that I could love without reservations. When Peter was born in 1980 and then Anna in 1983, our family was complete. My parents aged, seeing their grandchildren grow, finding in the little ones a joy I thought they would never see again. My father especially seemed to revive through them, playing, telling stories, being the loving grandfather he was always destined to be. In 1985, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Luke. I didn't open it immediately, leaving it on the kitchen table for days, unsure what to do. Finally, on a quiet Sunday, while the children played in the backyard and Mark read the newspaper, I took courage. "Dear Anna, I received your letter years ago and understood your position. I didn't expect a response, nor am I expecting one now. I just wanted you to know that your letter changed my life. Your words, harsh but fair, made me truly see the harm I caused. In the last few years I've rebuilt my life. I finished my studies, got a stable job, and met a good woman who knows about my past and still accepted me. I do therapy regularly and work as a volunteer at an institution that helps children who are victims of abuse. I'm not asking to return to your life. I know that's impossible. I just wanted you to know that your words had an impact, that they didn't fall on deaf ears, and that I wish from the bottom of my heart that you have found the peace and happiness you deserve. If one day you want to respond to know more about my life now, I'll be happy. But I perfectly understand if you prefer this to be the last communication between us. With affection and sincere remorse, Luke." I showed the letter to Mark, who read it in silence. "What do you want to do?" he asked simply. I thought for a long time. The wounded girl inside me wanted to tear up the letter, to ignore that Luke existed. But the woman I had become, teacher, wife, mother, could see something beyond anger. "I think I'll respond," I finally decided, not to resume contact, not to completely forgive, but to show that I survived, that I built a good life despite what they did. My response was brief, containing only basic information about my life, my marriage, my children, my career as a teacher. I didn't include photos or an address, just a simple account of who I had become. "I'm glad you found a path to redemption," I wrote at the end. "That's the most I can say right now." I never received news from David or Matthew. Years later, I learned from an acquaintance from Riverdale that David had died in a bar fight in 1990, and that Matthew had moved to the West Coast, losing contact with everyone. Luke responded once, thanking me for writing, saying he was married and expecting his first child. I didn't respond this time, and he respected my silence. Life continued its course. My children grew up strong and secure without knowing about my dark past. My father passed away in 1992 in peace, knowing I was well. My mother followed him 2 years later, passing away in her sleep, as if she didn't want to stay without him any longer. Mark and I grew old together, watching our children graduate, marry, and give us grandchildren. The love between us, which began so hesitantly, grew and transformed into something deep and unshakable. He never stopped being that patient man who respected my boundaries, who made me feel safe. In 2010, already a grandmother of 4 grandchildren, I made a decision I never imagined I would make. I wrote to Luke asking to meet, not for him, but for me, to definitively close that chapter. We met at a cafe in downtown Philadelphia. He was very different. Grey hair, deep wrinkles, reading glasses. He didn't look at all like the teenager who had participated in my torment. We talked for almost 2 hours about our lives, our children, our regrets. "I never stopped being sorry," he said, his eyes down. "Not a single day." "I know," I replied, surprised to feel no anger, just a distant sadness. "And I hope you never do." It wasn't a reconciliation meeting. There were no hugs, no promises to keep in touch. It was a closing meeting, a definitive turning of the page. When we said goodbye, he asked, "Were you able to be happy, Anna, despite everything?" I thought of Mark, of our children, of our grandchildren, of the life we had built together. "Yes," I answered sincerely, "very happy." And that was the greatest victory, not having allowed those months of horror to define my entire existence, having chosen life, love, and happiness despite the scars. Today, at 73, I look back and see a difficult path, but one that was worth travelling. I'm a grandmother of 7 wonderful grandchildren, a retired teacher who helped hundreds of children, a woman who learned that the worst wounds can heal if we give them time and care. My dears, who have watched me until now, thank you for listening to my story. If I'm telling this today after so many years of silence, it's because I believe it can help someone who is going through something similar, to say that there is hope, that there is a path beyond the pain. If you're facing your own valley of shadows, remember you are stronger than you imagine. Healing can be slow, it can be difficult, but it is possible. Believe that. And before I say goodbye, I wanted to thank the 20,000 subscribers. That's a lot of people. My goodness, don't forget to leave a like on this video, subscribe to Grandparents' Tales, and